Hello everyone! Today's show is going to be brought to you by the numbers 66 or 66, depending on which way you want to read them. So, that's a clue about what we're going to talk about today. So today I'm going to start a new section in the rulers and leaders videos. This is going to be the start of the Germa kingdom, or the Vinsmoke family, given that they are the ruling family of the German kingdom and the only family within the German kingdom that we're really aware of in regards to its history beyond all of the clones. I get to them. So, the German kingdom, also known as the Kingdom of Science, is, well, it's a seafaring kingdom. And it is a former member of the world government. So, kind of what we understand about the German kingdom is that about 300 years ago, it was the center of the German Empire, which was formed by the Vinsmoke family in their conquest of the North Blue. And what had happened, where the number 66 comes from, or 66 comes from, is that for 66 days, the Germas, the Vinsmokes, the German kingdom, ruled over the entirety of the North Blue for 66 days. And then after that, there were probably rebellions and other stuff. Maybe the Marines stepped in or something. Pirates probably got involved. It's a mini world government situation for all intents and purposes. And then eventually they are just chipped away at until they are just the remainder is whatever the German kingdom was probably to begin with. I'll go a little bit more into like the history or like some of the theories that either I've heard or that I've thought of that could involve the German kingdom in that regard. But we also know that nowadays the German kingdom is just giant seafaring kingdom that rides on the backs of giant sea snails, which is like, okay, that's a cool way of getting around. I'll give you that. Them going all over the world since they have this mobile kingdom, and they offer services as basically hired guns that other countries can hire and use them in battle because of their clones and because of the Germa themselves, Vinsmokes themselves with their powers. They're able to hire them and use them. And they are also known, in the underworld or part of the underworld within the One Piece world as Germa 66. So just kind of the general kingdom information. In regards to the geography, as I said, most of this kind of comes from stuff that is either said by one of the Germa siblings or by Judge himself. Or one of the Vinsmoke siblings, excuse me. So Reiju mentions that this is a nation without land. And this is, of course, because of the fact of, like, whatever was the Germa's homeland might just be gone now. I mean, that was 300 years ago. That was before, that was prior to the giant robot the giant ancient robot that attacked Marijois. That was prior to that. I wouldn't say that there's the possibility that, like, the ancient weapon that Uranus was used to destroy it, I don't think that would be the case. Although I guess the world government or EAM at the time, and if it's the current Gorosei or a different batch of Gorosei or some combination of the two, since we don't exactly know that full setup there, that maybe they saw the Germa as a threat at that point in time, and they kind of, helped with dismantling that, dismantling their hold on the North Blue. That's a possibility. But eventually it just basically became that they didn't have any land that was themselves, so its territory is later just shown to encompass all of these platforms and everything like that are on top of these giant, the giant sea snails that are very similar to the Denden Mushi. Although that brings up the concept that if they are similar to the Denden Mushi, and if they are to a degree similar to like the transponder Mushi, the visual Denden Mushi that they have as well, is it possible that basically, because like they also just have like regular Denden Mushi in the German kingdom, but is it possible that like all of these giant sea snails are just currently broadcasting Vegapunk's message to the world? Like, is it just all of them? Like, is it like a giant blue or giant screen that's like an IMAX screen hovering over all of the German kingdom right now so everybody can see what's going on? Because we know that like Judge and Caesar were listening to it. bear in mind, I'm recording this just after Vegapunk's message was interrupted by the Gorosei smashing into the ancient robot, so I don't know if there's been any additional information that has popped up. But, so, I mean, that's just a thought in regards to the snails. Are they all broadcasting it in this regard? Or, because, like, they have to communicate with themselves and be able to be controlled by the Germa soldiers as they're moved around. So that's that. We know that the snails are able to climb the red line. We see that, and I'll go over that later in the history section of this. The ships can usually move independently, and depending on, you know, whatever's going on for the kingdom activities, we saw this where, like, Reiju and Yunji were off on, like, one snail, and that's how they interacted with the Straw Hats, and then Ichiji and Niji were off on another snail, or, like, probably one or two snails, depending on stuff, off at the Barakoli Kingdom in regards to taking care of what was going on there. Handling that little revolution thing before they made their way home. And then we also see that the snails are able to all reconnect into a certain configuration to just recombine everything. Now, given the fact that there's also a giant F-off castle / city involved in this country, I would assume that there are certain snails that generally, barring like if they're climbing over the red line, that generally stay in a certain formation and don't really click apart Tetris style until, you know, they have to. And, you know, in that regard, or they just have ones that like permanently stay together as they, you know, are able to climb up and over things. Because given the circumstances, we know that they've been into the East Blue, and then we also know that they're in the Grand Line currently in the New World side, so they have to at least be able to go up and over the Red Line probably once or twice over the last, you know, however many years. Over the last, you know, 10, 12 years or everything since they went to the, you know, East Blue. So we know that for, like, privileges that the Germa Kingdom has, that the Vinsmokes have, is that they were once members of the world government. They were part of, I think there was something about maybe they had been invited to Reverie, but then certain things happened and that, like, privilege was revoked or something. Because in all honesty, I think it would be a wise decision for the world government and for the Gorosei as a whole to want to keep an eye on the Germa, and, you know, on the Germa Kingdom itself and on the Vinsmokes, just given what Judge seems to be capable of. With his cloning technology and with what he was able to do in regards to modifying his children, which I hate that concept. So, you know, so there's like that concept there where just like they had certain privileges. We also know that they were, they had the right to attend Reverie, but we know they didn't go this time. I guess there's a possibility maybe they went 4 years ago or 8 years ago, which 8 years ago would have corresponded when everything happened with Wapple and Vivi and Cobra. But as far as we're aware, they weren't there. You know, it's not like we saw Judge in the background or anything like that, but that's just hindsight of, like, Judge didn't necessarily exist at that point in time. Maybe as a background story in regards to Sanji, but Judge did not exist at that point in time in the concept of the story itself. Judge was a whole, not 20 years from existing, but a good chunk of time from existing, 15-ish years from existing at that point in time. We also know that they have some type of an effect over the bounty system because they are able to issue like a direct command to the Marines for, they adjust Sanji's bounty poster after, you know, after the time skip when they get the bounty posters. After Dressrosa, we see that Sanji's has been altered, so it only says wanted alive as opposed to dead or alive the way that everybody else's are. I know that there's, side note on this theory, I know that there's, I think there's a theory that like maybe Bonnie's poster would have been very similar, because the world government, of course, because of like them wanting to be able to control Kuma, they wanted to be able to have Bonnie as a hostage. So Bonnie, if Bonnie's bounty poster was captured alive only, then that would make sense. But I don't think we've ever actually seen her canon bounty poster. We know what her bounties have been, but we don't know what her canon bounty poster looks like, or even her original bounty poster looked like back when she first started her journey and first, you know, became a supernova and everything. in the worst generation. So we know that they had that privilege to affect the bounties, but then eventually all of these privileges are revoked because of what happens at Hotland, because of course it's revealed to the world that the Germa were trying to set up this arranged marriage with an Emperor of the Sea, with one of the Yonko, and, to have, to join forces with them. And of course that just got their privileges just fully revoked, and they are no longer associated with the world government. So there's that. But he was, Judge was willing to take that risk of like, well, I can make this alliance with the Big Mom Pirates, with the Charlotte family, and then they'll help me take over the North Blue again. But then it's just like, but then you lose all of your privileges in the world government. So it's like his ego in regards to trying to reclaim this fallen glory worth losing your ability to be part of the world government at that point in time. I guess in his opinion it was a big enough risk that he was willing to take, but he failed in both endeavors. Now he's doesn't have a connection to the Charlotte family, and he does not have any powers within the world government. But he now has a gas clown that he can have as his lackey. So there's that. I already talked about the architecture a little bit. Lots of castles and different types of medieval-looking buildings that are part of the landscape of the Germa. There's not too much there. The landscape, or the landmarks, is basically, there is the Vinsmoke Castle, which is, of course, where we see Sanji and his siblings growing up when they are kids, before Sanji leaves. And then, of course, we get to see good chunks of this castle when Sanji is brought back to the Germa, and he's able to, he has like this giant room there, and we see, portraits all over the place. We see all of this other stuff. We see all of these maids that are just willing to serve them. And in regards to like the citizens of Germa, we know that they are basically probably raised from birth to just be, you are loyal to the Vinsmokes. End of story. Whatever you want, whatever they want, you do. Which is a horrible way of raising someone and a horrible society to live in. That's very much Handmaid's Tale territory there. The clones have it genetically programmed in them to be this way, but we also see like the maids and Cosette is the cook, and we see other people there, like some of the other scientists, that's like, they're not programmed to be loyal as far as we're aware, but they still kind of have to be out of fear in regards for their own life. So yeah, there's that. We know that in the castle itself, there is the giant throne room that has like this giant, very World War II German setup in regards to how it's designed. Yeah, certain words I got to avoid in this video. That are there in the background that are very reminiscent of that giant, like, two-headed eagle in the background, I think, or a giant eagle in the background, or a Garuda, since that's kind of the reference to like what Judge's title is as one of the Germa 66, and all of that stuff. And I mean, like, it's a cool looking throne room. I will not argue with that. And then of course they have like the table at the bottom that has all of the numbered chairs. Now there's the question of like, because they have 0 for Reiju, 1, 2, and then 4 for Ishiji, Niji, and Yonji, but did they always have a third one made that was like, for Sanji if he ever showed back up again and managed to work his way back into Judge's good graces? Was that a possibility? Or was it just, no, we had one hastily made, but it looks fine type of a thing? So I don't know there. They also have the medical ward where we see that's where Sora was quite a bit during the flashback where we see her. That's basically where Sora was. We also see that, there's just other points there, where Sanji goes there and visits her in the past. They also have the Soldier Stock Depot, which is just a sad name for this, which is where all of the different Germa clone soldiers are. And, of course, they are the basis of the Germa 66 and the fact that they are designed to, this is where all the soldiers are grown. And they're, that's where they're made and they're raised there within the tubes, which is in the vats and whatever. until they're needed to either replace soldiers that died, or they're just like this new batch that they come up with. And of course, they're all programmed to not question where they frickin' come from, which I'm like, okay, sure. I mean, at least in Star Wars, it's like, at least in Star Wars with all the clone troopers, it's like, they know that they're clones. That's not a secret that's hidden from them. They know that they're clones. They know that there's other ones within them that are all clones of the same person. And there's like all the younger clones and everything like that, and even the older clones. But it's like, at least they know that they're clones, and they know that they've been programmed for certain things. But like, the clones that the Germa have don't seem to know that they are clones. I think that's specifically stated by either Judge or one of the brothers, that they don't know that they're clones. Even though I look exactly like, Fred looks exactly like Steve and Bob and Joe and Fred and whatever else you want to go with in regards to that. Which is just sad. We also know that this is just where, Judge tends to do other experimentation. This is probably where he was doing experimentation to come up with, like, the different powers that he wanted to give to all of the different kids in regards to, Reiju's poison powers and Ichiji's, sparking red powers, and, Niji's, Dengeki blue powers for his electricity and everything, and, for giving Yunji a wench arm, I guess. I don't know. That's the one I'm like, that makes no sense, but whatever. Also, this is where, like, Sanji's raid suit would have been manufactured, probably within, like, the scientific depot area. And then we also, of course, we know that they had the dungeon, which is, of course, where Sanji was held for about 6 months before he was able to escape with Reiju's help. In regard to the royal family, just overview, of course, there is the Vinsmoke family that have been ruling over the kingdom for at least 300 years, given the fact that they were the ruling family back 300 years ago during, the German Empire. Whether or not they were, maybe like they were the original family, maybe that had founded the German kingdom, or maybe they had taken it over at some point in time in, like a past time frame. We don't really know that much about it. It could have been that it was a kingdom that existed all the way back during the Void Century. It's just that either they weren't involved in the war, or if they were, maybe the Vinsmoke family were the family that were put in charge after, like, the king and queen and, like, their family left to go and be some of the soldier, or be one of the Celestial Dragon families in Marijois. Which I guess, like, the best candidate for that, just because it's, like, a scientific connection, would be, like, Saturn's family, like, was his family, like, originally the ones who had founded the Germa Kingdom, which is, I guess, a possibility there, just because we know that he's very much involved in science and everything. But we don't know if the concept of, like, all this scientific discovery and everything like that was something that the Germa always had, or if it was something, like, if they had that 300 years ago when everything happened, or was it just their military might that they were able to use to conquer, or if it was Judge was the one that brought this scientific knowledge to the Germa kingdom and everything like that after his dealings with Vegapunk in the past. So there's that possibility there one way or the other. And we may not find out until much later on. That would be an interesting question to ask Oda in an SBS, I guess. Also in regards to the Germa, there is, of course, the Germa Double Six. First in regards to the royal family, the current royal family is basically Vinsmoke, as I said, Judge is the king, and then, of course, his late wife was Queen Sora, although we didn't really see her have any much of political power. And then, of course, they have their 5 children, which was Reiju, Ichiji, Niji, Sanji, and Yunji, even though Sanji has left and has revoked his right as a Germa, and he's fine with that. Hence why there is going to be no Sanji video in any of this stuff for the Germa Kingdom, because he's a main character, and it would take, like, 3 to 4 videos to just cover everything with Sanji. But I'll be talking about certain aspects of his relationship with the Germa and with the Vinsmokes itself when I talk about the different Vinsmoke characters, obviously. The rest of the Vinsmokes family. So the German Double Six is, of course, kind of like the military aspect of this, where a lot of the predominantly male soldiers are used and comprise, the majority of the Germa army. We know that they are led by the different siblings or by Judge, depending on the certain aspect of whatever type of a mission that they are on, that they are hired to perform, or just Judge has decided to take like this setup in regards to we're going to support this side because they're paying us more, as opposed to that side who wouldn't pay us or they didn't give us anything that would be useful to us, so we won't worry about that. But there's not much there in that regard that we see. We really only see them involved in two things. One, when they first get over the red line and into the East Blue, they attack that kingdom there. And then the other one is, of course, when they're dealing with the Barakoli kingdom. But those are about the only two instances we see with that. But presumably they've been involved in other things all over the world over the last, 10, 12 years or so since, Sanji left. As I said, there are other citizens there that tend to be the servants in the castle. There's Cosette, of course, and then there's the different medical staff, and then, of course, there's the handmaids and everything like that that are all involved here. And, of course, the clones are raised to be nothing but loyal and willing to jump in front of, Judge or one of the others if they're going to get attacked, as we see during the battle or the little skirmish that Sanji and Judge have against each other, where several of Judge's soldiers just jump in front of him to block Sanji's attack so he can still stab through them and try to attack Sanji. And then, of course, we see that, at least the brothers don't really have much of a care for any of the handmaids or the cooks or anything like that, because we see the way that Niji treats Cosette in that regard, and he has no care for her well-being. And then, of course, he then beats her up later on after Sanji stood up for her. Reiju seems to at least treat them like somewhat of individuals in that regard, I think. But beyond that, I don't really know how much Reiju tends to differ from her brothers in that regard, although she does have emotions in regards to empathy and sympathy and compassion and stuff like that, as opposed to the other three brothers who do not. In regards to the history for the Germa Kingdom, as I said, pretty much the earliest thing that we know about is, of course, about 300 years ago is, of course, when the Germa was at the center of the German Empire, and which spanned the entirety of the North Blue for 66 days. But after that, over time, the Germa Kingdom and the ruling family have made extensive efforts in regards to try to regain their empire. Now, in this regard, we do not know exactly how many of them were exceedingly successful in this regard, because the only German king we know about pretty much is Judge. And, I had the theory in regard to Judge, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit more when I talk about Judge in the next video for his video. There's a theory that maybe he went to work with Vegapunk because there wasn't much that he could do in the German Kingdom at the time, and he saw, working with Vegapunk and Caesar and Queen and everything like that in Mads, that gave him his opportunity to be able to have this funding because of Dufeld, that they were then able to, he could work on his different types of genetic research that he wanted to do and have these other scientists around them that could help with cracking, the lineage factor and everything like that. And then he took that and applied it to making his clone army and, manipulating the genetics of his own children and everything along those lines. Now, I will talk about Sora, the Warrior of the Sea, at the end of the video in regards to my thought for how that ties into everything, but that I'll talk about later. We know that Judge has very much kept up his obsession with trying to, regain the empire that was the Germa Empire from 300 years ago that only lasted 66 days. He has been, devoted to that for so long. And, of course, this has led to one of the things that is the conquest of the Four Kings, which is this reference to, this portrait that hangs in the room that we see Sanji in. And whether or not this is supposed to be, this portrait was painted either before Sanji left or after is left up for debate, but we know that this happened at some point in time where, Judge managed to conquer, 4 kings that were in the North Blue, and then ends up, I guess, trying to take over their kingdoms or something like that. or this is a representation of just this is what Judge wants to do. We're not sure. And we don't know that information about that many kingdoms in the North Blue. I don't remember. I mean, that's where Law and everything happened with him, and Doflamingo and Rocinante and everything like that. And of course, that's where Drake and Hawkins are from. But I don't remember if there's really too much else there. At least Drake's from there. I know that. I think Hawkins was as well, but I don't remember. And Drake's alive, and Hawkins might be dead, so I don't really care about Hawkins. So like they have that connection there, and of course that's where like they all read, of course, Sora, Warrior of the Sea, and everything like that in that regard, which I'll talk about later. But there's that that kind of suggestion there. We know at some point in time Judge married Sora, and she became the queen consort of the German kingdom, and then she eventually gave birth to Reiju, and then later on gave birth to the four princes. And then, of course, she became very sick, just kind of going over story points here. She became very sick, and because of the drugs she took while she was pregnant with the sons, and of course, this led to her being gravely ill after she gave birth to them, and she's just bedridden until she passes away. We know that during this time frame, Judge continues to just, raise and train his children again and again and again with, Reiju and the other three boys doing wonderfully in regards to their testing and skills and everything like that, and Sanji not, because he actually has emotions, and Reiju has seen what her father is willing to do and is willing to work with him at this point in time for her own safety, which is understandable. We know eventually, as I said, Sora passes away, and then sometime after that is when Sanji is locked up in the dungeons, and they just pretend that he died, and then he's kept in the dungeons with the iron mask on. Don't know why they put the iron mask on him. It's just a way of demoralizing and dehumanizing him, in that regard. And then, of course, eventually this is where, they climb the Red Line and make their way into the East Blue from the North Blue, which I think the North Blue bordered the East Blue in this regard on the other side of the Grand Line, or the other side of the Red Line. I think so. For how they would have gotten there, I guess. I can never remember the exact setup of how everything fits together in the One Piece world at that point in time. But they make their way into the East Blue, and of course this is when Sanji manages to escape with the help of Reiju. And they, the German kingdom are attacking the island of Kozia in the East Blue, and this allows Sanji to escape, and he ends up on the orbit, then eventually ends up with Zeph. So Judge allowed Sanji to flee because Sanji was of no use to him. And so that's what happens there. And we really don't know that much else about what happens to the Germa kingdom between when Sanji leaves after that attack on the Kozia kingdom, which they were hired to do, and when we finally meet them during the whole Cake Island arc. We don't know what happened during like that 10, 12-year time frame, because they're never brought up. It's not like we can go back and see like, Nami reading about the Vinsmokes in the newspaper, or like Robin reading about them in the newspaper or something like that. That's never something that comes up. Even though like the Germa are the villains and the Sora Warrior of the Sea, but like up until that's introduced, we don't really know that there's like comic strips in the newspaper, although that makes perfect sense that there would be comic strips in the newspaper. And subsequently, we have learned that there are other comic strips as well. But eventually what happens is, of course, we know that Judge works on trying to make this alliance with the Charlotte family, so that way the Big Mom Pirates will help him in conquering the East Blue. And, of course, he offers up Sanji to be the groom, and then, of course, Pudding is going to be the bride for this wonderful wedding. And, so it's been 13 years, I think it's been about 13 years. I guess, so apparently, I don't know, according to what it says here from what I got from the Wikipedia, the this wedding had been arranged for a while, but I'm like, for 13 years this wedding was arranged? That doesn't make any sense. Pudding would have been 3. And I don't know, that just doesn't quite click in regards to that. But okay, I don't remember that ever being brought up, but whatever. But eventually, of course, you know, the Vinsmokes are part of trying to, you know, get this all set up with Sanji and Pudding for the wedding and everything like that. We have it where Sanji is reunited with his father and his siblings, and that does not go well. And then, of course, that's when Sanji is finding out about so much of this other stuff, you know, in regards to the clone soldiers, and seeing how just obsessed his father is with this and all this other stuff. And of course, we find out that, of course, the, you know, Big Mom's plan is to literally, oh, well, we're just going to kill all the Vinsmokes at the wedding, and then we will take over the German kingdom, and I can get a hold of their cloning science, which will be very useful to me. Which is a very good plan. I'm not going to argue with that. And I think I said in the Big Mom video when I was talking about that, for the Totland section, that was a very good idea. Was to just, like, get as much of that as possible. Like, yeah, kill the Vinsmokes and then take the cloning technology. That's a wonderful idea, and force the scientists who now work for you. Wonderful idea. Better than Kuro's plan. Way back in the East Blue. It's better than that plan. So, you know, that ends up happening there. We know that we see the kingdom kind of reconverging within Whole Cake Island. So we get to see, like, the whole kingdom there together in regards to the Germa kingdom. There's not too much there in regards to, you know, I mean, and I'll go over this more, you know, when I talk about the individuals, but, you know, Sanji reuniting with his family doesn't necessarily go well. Even him and Reiju have this strained connection there, but that gets better. We know eventually they have to end up having, you know, the dinner with the Charlottes, with Big Mom and Pudding, where, you know, Sanji and Pudding are, you know, introduced to each other. I'll go over more about, like, the interaction with Cosette when I talk about stuff from, like, Reiju's point of view during that dinner. And then, of course, where Ishiji, Niji, and Yonji are involved in that dinner. But, yeah, there's the moment there that happens with Cosette and all of that, and Sanji. And there's not too much else there beyond the fact of, like, you know, that they head off to go and have the dinner with that. And then they're in the castle for the rest of the night at Whole Cake Chateau. And then eventually, kind of the next time that this is involved is when, you know, Reiju and the other and the 3 boys end up back at, you know, back at the German kingdom after the wedding, so that way they can, you know, stop the conquest of Big Mom's children from trying to, you know, take over the island and get their cloning technology. And of course, they're able to defeat the Big Mom Pirates squad that are there. And then, you know, via the technology that they have, Niji is able to replicate Nosdorte's voice to trick Montdor. Say that, yeah, we've captured, yeah, we have the German kingdom, it's ours now, we have their technology, and the Germa are dead. It's like, okay, fine. Back to the problem with the wedding cake. So, you know, that happens. And then, of course, they show back up again, and they're able to help in regards to helping get Luffy off Cacao Island. Luffy and Sanji off Cacao Island, so that way they can, you know, Sanji and Luffy can escape Totland together, along with the rest of the Straw Hats. And then, so we know that that's involved there. We know that Judge and Sanji do not part on good terms, not that we would expect them to. Sanji and Reiju part on better terms. So there's that. And then there's not too much else information here. After that, we know that the Germa, you know, kind of fight against Big Mom so the Straw Hats can escape. But we know that during this time frame, I think it was Niji and Yonji are captured, and then of course Reiju and Ichiji go back and save them, and then of course they bring Caesar back with them. It's also revealed in the paper that during the Reverie arc that they're like, oh yeah, because of their attempts to ally with the Big Mom pirates, yeah, the Germa kingdom are no longer part of the world government. They have lost their rank. That right has been revoked. So there's that. And then, of course, we know that eventually after they get Niji and Yonji back and they bring, Caesar back because reasons and plot that I hope involves being somewhat relevant later on, take them back to the Germa kingdom. And then, of course, they all escape and the Germa kingdom has managed to escape. And, of course, they're kind of like the new base for the Neomads with Judge and Caesar working together. And if Queen would happen to show up at some point in time, that might be another fun family reunion there. Or co-worker reunion, I guess. Now I'm going to mention Sora Warrior of the Sea. So, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because, of course, in Sora Warrior of the Sea, the Vinsmokes, or the Germa 66, are portrayed as, of course, the villains within this. And Sora is, of course, the hero. He is this, fictional marine hero that has this, pet seagull and this transforming robot that he's able to use to fight against the enemies of the world government, the enemies of the Marines and everything like that. And of course, it's this huge propaganda piece that is printed in the World Economic Times where, Sora is like this, superhero type character and everything like that. And so that's the whole setup there, and he fights against the evil Germa 66. Now, the thing that I point out here is Law and Drake and Vito all grew up reading stuff about the Germa 66. And I believe all of them are older than Sanji. So we know that the concept for like the evil versions of the Germa 66, I mean, not like the Germa 66 are necessarily all that good to begin with, but that the Germa 66 are portrayed as these horrible villains in this, but it's also, that implies that like this concept for them to be there has been around longer than Sanji and his siblings have been around. So my theory is that this has just been a very long-running piece within the World Economic Times. The World Economic Times existed even back during Roger's day, 20-something years, 24, 25 years ago, maybe even a bit before that, because we know that Morgans is not the founder of the World Economic Times. He is now the editor of it and the one in charge of it, but he was not originally. He was originally just like a reporter that worked for the World Economic Times and then built his name up as now in charge of it. But we don't know how long the World Economic Times have been publishing. And Sora may have been this, long-running series from, like, the beginning. And it just continues to be the same where it's just like, well, we need a villain here. It's just like, okay. And it may have been, my thought is that maybe, like, the original person who started this, who may have been, because it's Marine propaganda, but my thought is that maybe, like, the Marines have to have like a PR department where they handle all of the public relations and everything like that. So the Marines have to have that. And maybe in that regard, they have someone there who is the one who's in charge of Sora Warrior of the Sea. And what maybe happened was maybe when that person was younger, they ended up, like, maybe their kingdom was attacked by the Vinsmokes, by the Germa. Maybe this could have been Judge's father or the previous king of the island, depending on how that went. And we also don't know how long they've been on snails, how long they've been like a mobile kingdom. We don't know exactly how long that's been. But my thought is that the person who started Sora Warrior of the Sea as like this comic, like maybe their home was attacked by the Vinsmokes. Maybe they were from the North Blue and their home was attacked by the Germa. And maybe it, they're like, okay, well, maybe I'm not very good as a Marine in regards to fighting, but maybe I have something else that I can offer. And then they start coming up with this idea of like Sora, Warrior of the Sea. And then they make the villains, or the main villains in the series, the Vinsmokes, the evil Germa Double Six, and they make all these different character designs. You know, they make this, you know, judge, or what would end up being like the representation of like the king with like the orange and the horror there, and like this, Machiavellian thing in the background that's controlling everything. And then of course the four main ones that we see, but then also, you know, the stealth black who's, you know, can turn invisible and all of that stuff. And then he comes up with all of this stuff along with like what their powers can be. And then this gets published all over, you know, at least all over the North Blue, if not all over, you know, the world probably, for however many of them would have read it. The dog is snoring in the background. And it would have been published all over the world. And my thought is that Judge is sitting there having to read this, or having Caesar and Queen make fun of him while they're at Mads and being like, hey, Judge, look what they keep writing about your family. Look what they keep doing. And then Judge is just like just angry and like experimenting and everything like that. And like he starts to develop things that are similar to what's in the comic, where he's like, well, I mean, it's not a bad idea. Maybe I can use some of that ideas. They're like, electric powers wouldn't be bad for someone to have, and poison wouldn't be bad either. And like he starts to develop that, and eventually he, Mads gets disbanded because Vegapunk goes and works for the world government, and then Judge makes his way back to the Germa kingdom, and then maybe either his father died or he killed his father or whatever, and now he's king. And I would say this is about like 26, 27 years ago or something like that. And then eventually he finds Sora, marries her, and then they have Reiju. And Reiju is kind of this like experiment child, and he's like, okay, she was a daughter. Okay, well that works for, the poison pink. That works for that. Now I need 4 sons to fill out the other one. And it's this concept of like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to a degree, where it's like my concept is just like, Judge is like, well, if they're going to make my family the villains in this setup, then screw them. I'm just going to make them really strong and take their idea and make it a reality and have these 5 children and give myself the powers of like the king in the background, and make my children these setups here and have them all serve me and all this other stuff. And yeah, I'll take away their emotions, because negative emotions are a weakness and all this other stuff. And he just does that. And that's just my concept there for like, that's why all of the kids are the way that they are and why they match up with the comics. It's not, the comics are based on the kids, because the kids would not have been old enough for Law and Vito and Drake and the others to have read about them while they grew up, because they're younger, because they're older than Sanji. And it's not like they had other versions of the Germa running around at that point in time that would have fit that dynamic, as far as we're aware. Unless by some chance Judge has 3 brothers and a sister that we don't know about in that regard. And it's just, Judge made them this way so that way they fit the comic, because he's angry at the comic for making fun of his heritage. And he's just like, you made me the villain? Fine. I'll be the bad guy then. I was going to be the bad guy anyway, but now I'll just take your idea and make it better. And give my kids cool outfits. Screw you, newspaper. And that's just my concept for what happened there. It's also this concept of like the rest of the fam, and like all 6 of those members, the Germa Double Six, are represented there. And then Sora, Warrior of the Sea, has the same name as his queen. And he may have specifically found her because she had that name, because her name was Sora, the same as the character in the comic, as a way of just like sticking it to the comic even more. As just a way of just like, F this comic and I'm just going to do this my way. That's just my concept there for like how he managed to, pull that off and have all that there. And that would also explain why he never had any other children, because they already fit what he wanted. Even if Sanji was a failure, Stealth Black didn't show up that much in the comics. And he still made the raid suit, so it's not like he couldn't have found, given the raid suit or something like that and used it at some other point in time. But there is always the question of, why didn't Judge just have more children after Sora died? It's not like he couldn't have done that or whatever. But that's more of like, I guess, a question when I get to the Judge video next. But I wanted to point out that my thought for like how Sora fit into the timeline for the Germa Kingdom. So that's what I have here for this. I thank you for watching. Next up for this series would be Judge, where I'll talk about him, and then I'll have one about Sora, and then Reiju, and then one about the three boys, because they're mostly always together. And I said, Shanji's not getting it because he doesn't consider himself a Vinsmoke. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!